Okay, hi everybody. Just wanted to show you this quick video to explain what the quadratic formula is, and just as importantly, how we get the quadratic formula by the completing the square process. And so I think I should mention this is some pretty intense algebra here, but I want you to stay with me, and the most important thing is what we actually get at the end for the quadratic formula. And so just to kind of tell you what the quadratic formula is, as it says right here, the quadratic formula is a general formula for solving quadratic equations. And if you think about what we've been doing with not only completing the square, but also factoring and then solving, we're trying to figure out values for x that make the equation true. And the quadratic formula is probably the catch-all, be-all. It's the one that will always work no matter what method or what type of a quadratic function you have. Okay? And so we're going to start with the general form of the quadratic function. And what we want to do is we want to solve this. So using this function right here, ax squared plus bx plus c, we want to solve for x. And we're going to do it as it says up here by completing the square. So if you remember, the first step in this process is we take our function, which is ax squared plus bx plus c, and we put it equal to 0. Okay? And the next part of the first step of completing the square is we have to get 1x squared by itself. So what we have to do here is we have to divide everything by a. And so you can see we're going to be dealing with fractions, and so that's what I mean by we're going to have some intense algebra here. So after we do the first step of completing the square, what we end up with is 1x squared plus b over ax plus c over a, and this last little piece right here just ends up being 0. Okay, so that's the first step, getting ax squared, getting 1x squared right over here. So our next step then is we want to move the c value, in this case it's going to be c over a. So we want to get this on the other side. So how do we do it? We do it by subtraction. And we end up with x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. Okay? And here's where the fun begins, okay? Because remember what we do next in completing the square. We take half of this and then we square it. So when we do that, take our b over a and we divide it by 2. When we take half of that, what this becomes is b over 2a. Okay? Half of it. Think about 1/2. Okay? Then what we have to do is we have to square this. And we end up with b squared over 4a squared. Squaring the top, squaring the bottom. This is what we have to add to both sides. So our next step is we have x squared plus b over a. Sorry, can't see that very well, can you? Let me slide it up here. Plus b over a x plus b squared over 4a squared equals negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. So you can see some pretty intense algebra. All right. Our next step is to combine these two things. So we got to get a common denominator. So we have a common denominator of 4a squared. Okay? So think about how you add fractions. You get a common denominator. So right here we've got b squared. We can rewrite that. To rewrite this fraction so we have a common denominator, we went from a to 4a squared. So basically we multiply the top and bottom by 4a. So that's what I got to do here. And I get negative 4ac. And then I can combine these two since I have 4a squared on my denominator. So minus 4ac plus b squared. And that whole thing is over 4a squared. Now, that right here is equal to all of this. X squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared. Whew. All right. I want to do one other thing here. I want to take this and I want to rewrite it as b squared minus 4ac. So I just want to reverse those. So I'm going to write what I have, x squared plus b over a plus b squared over 4a squared equals b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 4a squared. Okay, whoops, you can't see that. Oh my goodness, how's that? Pause. So all I did was from down here, I rewrote that so the b squared was in front. Okay, pause and then write all that down. And unpause. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we got to factor all of this. So you're going to say, how the heck do I factor all this? Well, remember that little clue that we gave you. See this right here? The b over 2a? That's how this factors. So we have x plus b over 2a, the quantity squared, equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Whew. Okay, we got a square root. Next. So the next step is to square root, and I get x plus b over a, 2b, or excuse me, b over 2a equals plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac on the top. And the interesting thing about this bottom, it's the square root of 4, the square root of a squared, which is 2a. Last step in this very intense algebra is to take 2a away from each other, or excuse me, b over 2a. So we take b over 2a away from both sides. X equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. And because both of these things are over 2a, what we can do is we can combine them. So x equals minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. This is what's important. So if all this intense algebra is a little bit too much for you, that's okay. As long as you can see this formula, this is the quadratic formula. We know what a, b, and c are. They're going to be numbers. We're going to take a, b, and c are numbers, plug it into here, and solve for x. So let's rewrite the quadratic formula down here by itself. So put this down and then we're done. Let's say given f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, the quadratic formula is, this is the important part. Oh, and here's what else is cool. You can sing this to the Michigan Fight song. Opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now you know why I teach math. Okay, so x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.